I think there's 7 or 8 teams that we're going to see, not because of injury, we're going to see more than one quarterback play. I think, and I believe this, don't kid yourself, I think at some point we're going to see Garoppolo back in that lineup. So here's the pickle if you're John and if you're Kyle. You drafted this kid so high.
3 first-round picks.
Right? And, man, it's hard to sell to the guy upstairs writing the check that, well, we're – and so our little binky, our blanket is Garoppolo.
Yeah.
Right? But we're going to start this guy. We're committed to starting him. But at some point, if we're not having the rest of the roster is sitting there ready to win. And that was a tough one yesterday, though, for any quarterback.
Sean looks like he's ready to go fly fishing.
He's wearing that old guy brand. Old rich guy brand.
What'd you think?
Well, coming into the season, and it's going to snowball game to game, and after losses, the snowball is going to grow into avalanches like it has this week. The pressure on Trey Lance, we've talked about it, was so much more than the other 4 guys in his draft class. I mean, the other quarterbacks, right? The other 4 guys that went in the top 15. The only guy who has, I would say, any remote pressure of being successful would be Mac, just given that he plays for Belichick and the Patriots. The other guys, if all the other 3 teams win 5 games, no one's going to care, right? Trevor Lawrence. Now, there is pressure on Trevor Lawrence to look successful, like he has a chance, but actual wins and losses are irrelevant. And when you re-sign Jimmy Garoppolo, this conversation is not possible without Jimmy Garoppolo. So as we've talked about the widgets, these are human beings. And now knowing that you have him to go with. Now, the one area in which Sean is wrong, Jed York is not Jerry Jones or fucking Jerry Buss or John Mara. It has nothing to do with the guy upstairs. Jed doesn't give a shit. I'm not saying that he doesn't want Trey Lance to be it, but if they win, this is not Al Davis in 88.
He's asking, not telling.
Yes, Kyle is telling him to do. Now, ultimately, if Jed wanted to go rogue and fire him or whatever, but in the last thing Jed ever wants to do is have to hire another coach or general manager. So when I hear these conversations, what if Kyle doesn't get it done, and Jed's going to hire who? No. He wants to avoid that at all costs. He would give Kyle an extension right now. Now, from the outsider perspective, the way we talk about it, the way fans talk about it, the way internally players talk about it, the elephant in the room is how much you gave up for him and where he was drafted. But in terms of the ownership's irrelevant, I think, on this whole conversation. But where it's not is all the other stuff. The team, force-feeding Trey. If Trey had been a 3rd-round pick, would Jimmy be the starter right now?
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say yes.
There'd be no rush to develop Trey Lance. You'd be yeah, we could just develop him. No one would notice if you developed him behind the scenes. Nobody would care.
What if he had, instead of being the 3rd pick, had been the 38th pick?
Same. I don't think there'd be as much. There'd be no rush.
Given what we've seen out of the player, right? That's what I mean. Even if he had played what he had, 3.5 games, he
would not have opened the season as the starting quarterback. Plus, he'd be cheaper, right? That's the other thing. Not that it really matters for this team, but he would be cheaper then.
This is where I talked about, he's got to, have some moments of just some wow moments. Because, like you said, you watched Josh Allen and Mahomes. Josh Allen was going to a team that was terrible. It didn't matter. Patrick was not. Patrick was going to a playoff team, locked and loaded. And wouldn't you say, and like you told me before we press record today, it's hard to watch a 2017 game and remove knowing what you know. Both these guys are combined $700 million quarterbacks. And, when Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers calls it quits, lock 1 and 2. And they are box office. Everyone rooting for them. They're enjoyable. People wish they played each other all the time, nonstop. It's impossible to do that. But it is fair to say, you watch that Mahomes game, it was pretty clear, God damn, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that game was Andy creating, and Tyreek Hill was incredible. And it is...
But they were throwing, correct?
They were throwing, but they were not... It was not an overwhelming amount of downfield throws. I mean, they hit some wide open guys. And, he took a couple of shots, but it was a lot of just... Like, to me, it's less about wow and more about just having a high floor right now. Isn't that what we spent the whole offseason? Like, Trey Lance's job is just to have a high floor. Just don't be a roller coaster ride. You don't have to be 38 touchdowns or like become Josh Allen, but just be.
But you can't be 19 touchdowns, I think.
No,
and for
but
them to be
I think
good.
there's just a natural progression. You playing with the lead, you start winning games, and then there's a natural human thing that's called development where you just get a little more confident and a little more confident and a little more confident. And I think that's how you get there, is not by trying 50-50 throws. It's by just hitting 70% throws, right? Like, was it the end of the half where they tried to get now again, it's raining. Last week I have a hard time with, but where they try to get the ball to Debo. Well, I know, but last week was an absurd amount of rain. Where they tried to get the ball to Debo just to set up, some last end of the half play, and he just didn't get the ball to Debo. He just threw it in an uncatchable place. So, I think that the theory coming in. Let's remember what the theory coming into 2022 season was. Your roster's really good. Just be just be solid plus, and then hit the plays that are there to hit, and that'll be enough to keep Jimmy Garoppolo on the bench and keep everybody from talking about Jimmy. But the team's got to win. Like, it's just got to be, you got to win, right? Now, there are always going to be, over the course of a season, a handful of games where you got to make plays. And the hope is that you do enough of the basic stuff leading up that when those moments come, you're ready for them. But I like this week, for all the talk, and you're right, it's not just the talk from us, it's Sean Payton. It's just how people, these are all people. Sean Payton is a person, just like everyone in the chat is a person who just loves football and has a take on football. There's only so many takes you can have, And the reality is that once Sean Payton is in the media and not Sean Payton, the Saints coach, he just says his takes the same way that he said them to his buddies when he was the Saints coach. And they're just as public as my takes and your takes. Ultimately, Trey Lance and Kyle Shanahan and that group of players that are in the fight, John, man in the arena, like Sean Payton's opinion and Colin Cowherd's opinion and John Middlekauff's opinion, like all these opinions are just all of the opinions on the outside. Sean Payton's opinion is no more valuable when it comes to like Trey Lance and Kyle Shanahan. It's just everybody right now is talking about this. It is the biggest story of the NFL. It's bigger than Dak's injury. It's bigger than some of the teams that lost week one that, like the Raiders. It's bigger than Frank Reich's hot seat, which if they lose to the Jags this week, that's
the Rams' shitty offensive line.
Would you agree it's the biggest story in the league?
It's got to be right up there.
And the struggle with when you're the biggest story in the league is like, what you really need is just pars. You don't need Trey doesn't need a bunch of birdies and eagles. He just needs pars. But it feels like, because of all the talk, that he's like 8 strokes behind the leader. Sunday just started, and he's got to make a bunch of plays. But he doesn't.
But that's where all of a sudden, worst case scenario, you find, like, you look up, it's like third quarter, and the 49ers are down 20-14, and it's like, okay, I can't just par out and make the cut. Like,
But what I'm saying is they're not there yet, even though it feels they're 0-1. Right?
But it can happen fast.
It can.
Because if I tell you just right now the halftime score is 13-7, Seattle. That's just the halftime score. If I told you that right now, would you be feeling good, do you think, at halftime of them winning the game?
I would not. No, they're a 9.5 point favorite.
That's what I'm saying. So back-to-back weeks, 7-point favorite, 9-point favorite. Like, I bet if you added their 2 games up, they have the largest spread of any favorite for over 2 weeks. Like, Vegas is just pulling these numbers out of their ass. So their favorite, they have the better team again, and there is just a ton of tangible pressure. And this is where I get why Kyle says this. What's he going to say? Like, it's external noise that actually infiltrates our building, and then we do have to talk about it. And I tell Trey not to listen, and he tells me he's not listening, but I know he's human. He's 22, 23 years old. He fucking checks his phone. I claim I don't check my phone, but I'm 42. Of course, I check my phone too. Right? It's like they can't say that. But of course they're hearing some of these things. It is impossible not to. It's impossible not to.
But isn't it? It doesn't really matter as much as the fact that just Jimmy is right there, right? Like, there's a safety net for Kyle Shanahan that he would not have had if Jimmy Garoppolo weren't on the team.
But I think the Sean Payton is a pretty good example, because you can say whatever you want about Mike Martz, like he's a has-been. Now you can say when he was humming, he knew what he was doing. But let's just throw Mike Martz out. Sean Payton, I think it's fair to say, like, his opinion would not have been any different if I was Joe Lombardi, you were Dennis Allen. Tuesday afternoon, we were in his office talking about our game plan, feet up. Then we just transitioned to talking about some other things in the league, and we started talking about Jimmy and Trey. That would be his opinion. Him feet up, Saint shorts on, fucking hat off to the side, kind of just after practice, eating their lunch that gets delivered, bullshitting. Is it fair to say that more than likely that, because Sean's opinion was a lot different, it felt like, than Mart's that was like really aggressive. He was just talking like he was talking. Do you think
I mean, he also said
opinion?
he thinks 2 quarterbacks are going to play in Seattle and, didn't have Drew Lock's name. Like, I do think there's just, everyone has opinions, whether they're NFL head coaches or just casual fans, and it doesn't, it doesn't mean they're right.
But I think a lot of people think Sean Payton is not alone by any means that thinks Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be seen this year.
Right, but it doesn't mean, my point is the fact that you said it, that I said it, or that Sean Payton said it. When Sean Payton said it, it doesn't make it more likely that that happens because Trey Lance hasn't played yet. More than one game, right? Like Trey Lance can keep Jimmy Garoppolo on the bench. Everyone after one game is going, oh, I don't think he's going to keep him on the bench, or they're betting on kind of Kyle's impatience or whatever it is. There's a bunch of different reasons you can say that you think we'll see Jimmy, whether it's Trey related or Kyle related, whatever. But, I mean, Sean Payton knows more football than many, many, many people combined, myself included. And he may be right. But like you just said, he's not the first person to share that opinion. It doesn't mean it's going to happen.
No, I mean, if Trey stays healthy, it shouldn't happen just because you should try to work it out, even though we've talked about if it's not going well, we all agreed that, like, Kyle will not go down with the ship. So I think what makes this all believable is it's easy to go, God, I could see this scenario. I could see the scenario. I could see the scenario. It's not like these scenarios that are just so out of left field, right? It's very believable things that are being said. Removing Mike Martz, most of pretty normal conversations, like a Sean Payton level one or a Chris Sims level one, like, oh, that's believable.
Yeah.
Right? This also,
I mean, at one point
offense would want Jimmy.
Yeah.
I guess that's ultimately where I keep getting back.
But my point is, when we talk about it, we talk about it like it's believable. So this is a real issue they have to deal with, but they may never actually have to deal with this issue. And it may turn out in hindsight that it wasn't real at all. Right. Like last year, they might have gone to Trey Lance if they had lost 2 more games than they did in the middle of the season, but they didn't. And it never became a real issue. And Jimmy Garoppolo played in the NFC Championship game. So
ultimately, if he's able to keep improving through all this pressure, it'll be pretty impressive because it feels like there's a ton of pressure.
But here's what I would say is, like, I bet like Josh Allen, when I watched that game back, the way that they talk about Josh Allen was very different than the way that they talk about Trey Lance watching the Chicago game. But that doesn't mean that Josh Allen himself might have felt just as much pressure without everybody talking about it, right? There was a whole bunch of different kind of pressure on Josh Allen because no one, well, maybe it wasn't that different. It was kind of similar. The only difference was Nathan Peterman was his quarterback, but there was pressure in, like, who is this guy? Did you guys really just draft Josh Allen? Like when you're the number 1 pick and you're the leader of a room full of guys who have been in the league longer than you and are richer than you and just have won more than you and all that, like, there's a ton of pressure whether everybody supports you on the outside or not. There's just a lot of pressure, period.
Josh Allen's probably a good example because everyone thought, I don't think everyone thinks Trey sucks. Everyone thought Josh Allen sucked. Like, that it was an insane pick.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot, like, universally people thought Trey Lance was necessarily an insane pick. I think most people thought the Josh Allen thing was bananas.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Now, even though Schefter had said the year before, hey, there's this kid at Wyoming who's could be the number 1 pick next year. You remember that? Somebody obviously told him that.
Wasn't it the tweet right when the draft ended?
Yeah. It was the year before his draft that Schefter said that.
And then everyone was interested. We all watched them and were like, this is crazy.
Like, whoa. Well, I think I looked it up. I tweeted it the other day. His last 3 college games the stats were just horrific.
Well, for example,
Josh
if
Allen.
Trey Lance had played if there had been the buildup like that, like a tweet like that, ESPN would have found a way to get a couple North Dakota State games just on, like, Friday night. Like, there would have been moments like they did.
Was there a
with
one-off
Josh
game
Allen.
not on ESPN?
It's a great question.
I feel like it was.
Might have been. Maybe ESPN2 or 2.
So
or
maybe it
something.
wasn't. Maybe it was on like CBS Sports Network or something.
I think it
Fernando
was
on
a
the
pretty
stream.
shitty game.
Fernando Montana? No. Somebody in purple. Grizzlies of some sort. Fernando on the stream says, what's with all these sports commentators, specifically these two, walking back every single thing they said after one single game? I'm disappointed in you guys. Are you outrage chasing? Brady had 18 touchdowns and 12 picks his rookie year, but somehow Trey has to do better. You know, the hard part with comments that isn't like a conversation is I have no idea exactly what he's talking about. All of these takes are not black or white, all in or all out. Like, we could talk for 7 hours about Trey Lance with a bunch of different takes, and some people would take away from that we hate him, and some people would take away from that we're too optimistic on him. So I don't know what to say other than I don't really think of him that differently than I did a week ago. I just know that the reality of the situation exists in a world in which he has to win games, or if they're 0-2 this time next week because they've lost to the Seahawks. The real conversation in Kyle Shanahan's head is going to be, how long do I let this go before I make a change? Right. Like, that's a real thing.
The reality is of what we do, like the majority of industries, information changes. And in this business, it changes every Sunday. Every Sunday we get new information. And then your opinion changes or moves, or maybe you feel better about something, or maybe you're willing to pivot. And as more information comes, you adapt and say your opinion. Like, that's what we do. I don't even know what to tell that guy. Like,
but I would even say to you, John, sometimes the opinion doesn't change, but the opinion, it has many layers to it. Some are good, some are bad. Here's what we like. Here's what we don't like. Here's why it could work. Here's why it could not work.
Yeah.
I don't think Trey's performance against the Bears was an opinion-changing game, but it definitely wasn't an opinion, a confidence-inducing game. Like, I don't blame him for it.
He scored 10 points.
I don't blame him for it, but I don't come out of there feeling better about it either, right? Those two things can exist. I don't blame Trey Lance, but he didn't play great. Now,
I'm not giving him a fucking A on the report card.
Whatever challenge, throw, completion percentage, whatever it was. Carlos says Trey gets penalized for going to a good team with good roster development, with a good roster. He does get penalized in an expectation standpoint, but he gets helped by the fact that he's on a good team with a good roster.
Well, for example, I was thinking about this when the news today that Jamal Adams is out for the season. I mean, that guy's been hurt a lot. Is it Jamal Adams' fault that Seattle traded all those picks, 2 1s and a 2, then made him the highest paid safety, and he clearly has no business to be treated that, like, 1, to be traded for that much, and then 2, to be paid at that premium when he cannot cover a soul? Has Jamal Adams always struggled to cover, and now they put him in position? Or is that strictly on Seattle and John Schneider and Pete for making... You never know if it's a good or bad trade till after the fact, but even at the time, people thought, 1, it was a lot. Then they got him and were able to see him for a little bit and struggled, and then they doubled down and paid him, and people were like, this is insane. Right? Because remember, okay, they made a huge, bold move. Well, once they doubled down on their move, once it was kind of clear he wasn't a great cover guy, and paid him all that money, and I saw some people like, feel so bad for him. Feel so bad for Jamal Adams. Jamal Adams gets paid. Jamal Adams is fucking highway robbery. I don't blame him for signing the contract. They offered it to him, but, like, he's made out like a bandit. He's literally getting paid a premium for a job that he struggles mightily to do. And now that he's injured, he doesn't even have to do it, and he still gets his money.
But
Seattle
wants to do it. Your career is short. I got no problem with somebody saying.
No, I understand that he wants to play. He'd rather play than be hurt. But my point is, like, Jamal Adams made out like a bandit in this deal. Seattle got destroyed. But is it Jamal Adams' fault, or is it actually Seattle bears most of the blame for the terrible decisions?
They blame all. They get all the blame.